Before we continue, there's something here everyone deserves to know. The man standing beside me was paid to destroy my life. But he chose the wrong woman.
There is a sound Lagos remembers but does not discuss. It lasted 9 seconds. A 6-story residential tower on Ikorodu Road folded into itself like wet cardboard. The concrete giving way floor by floor, faster than anyone inside could understand what was happening to the ground beneath them. 211 people were inside. The sound it made, survivors who lived to describe it always struggled with the same word, was not an explosion. It was a settling. As if the building had simply decided it was tired of standing. Folashade Adeyinka was 19 years old and 3 streets away when she heard it. She has spent every year since trying to make sure she never hears anything like it again.
By 38, she is the engineer the Lagos State Building Authority calls when no one else will put their name on a structural report. She has failed buildings that powerful men needed to pass. She has been threatened twice, bribed more times than she can count, and once detained for 6 hours on a fabricated obstruction charge after she refused to certify a shopping complex in Ajah whose foundation had been poured 11 centimeters shallower than its blueprint specified. None of it has moved her an inch. She still goes to every disputed site herself. She still reads every soil report twice. She lives alone in a 2-bedroom flat in Yaba, stacked floor to ceiling with technical journals and load calculations. Eats a 4-euro from the same booker 4 nights a week. And has not had a relationship survive past the 3-month mark in over a decade. She tells people, when they ask, that she is married to the work.
The truth is colder than that, and she knows it. She does not trust anything she cannot calculate. Numbers do not lie to you slowly over years and then leave you standing in rubble. People do. Her father built half of Lagos Island before his name became the other thing Lagos remembers but does not discuss. Chief Bayo Adeyinka was, for 30 years, one of the most respected construction magnates in the country. A man who appeared at ribbon cuttings in white agbada, shook the hands of governors and funded scholarships in his own name with the kind of public generosity that made people forget to ask hard questions. His company, Adeyinka Construction, built the Ikorodu Road Tower. His company's inspection reports later discovered had been falsified. Cheaper, weaker rebar substituted for the steel specified in the original design. The difference pocketed quietly across 18 months of construction. The case against him took 4 years to assemble and collapsed in 9 months, the way cases involving powerful men in Lagos often do. Witnesses changed their statements.
A junior inspector who had flagged the substitution disappeared from the city entirely. By the time Bayo Adeyinka died of a heart attack 8 years later, he died a free, wealthy man, never formally charged, his name still on 3 buildings downtown. Fola changed nothing about her name, technically. She simply stopped using Adeyinka in professional settings where it might be recognized, going by Fola A on her credentials, and built a career on the precise opposite of everything her father represented. She has never once spoken publicly about him. She has also never once stopped hearing the sound the building made underneath every site visit, every signature, every report she refuses to sign until she has checked it herself twice, sometimes 3 times. She does not know and has never let herself ask what role she might have played if she had been older. If she had asked her father one more question. She was 19. She tells herself that absolves her. Most nights, she does not believe it. Across the city, in a smaller, meaner kind of trouble, Emeka Obi owes 11. 3 years ago, Emeka was a real estate developer with a half-finished tower in Ajah and a sales pitch sharp enough to move 40 apartment units before the building existed past the second floor. The investors discovered the gap between promise and concrete at roughly the same time the money ran out. Lawsuits followed. Most of them, Emeka managed to settle or stall. The one that mattered, the one tied to a man named Chief Daniel Okonkwo, who had invested through an intermediary Emeka never properly vetted, did not settle. Okonkwo does not deal in patience. He deals in leverage. Emeka's mother's house in Surulere is the collateral he foolishly offered 18 months ago. In a meeting he still replays at 3 in the morning, certain he could find a way to make the development work before anyone called the debt. No one called the debt. Not directly. Instead, 6 weeks ago, Okonkwo's lieutenant, a quiet, unhurried man named Tunde who never raises his voice and has therefore never needed to, invited Emeka to a meeting at a private club in Victoria Island that Emeka had no money to be a member.
Chief has a proposal, not a payment plan, a proposal. A proposal. Go on. It's an opportunity, one we can't refuse. I'm listening.
Emeka told himself, driving home that night, that this was simply information gathering, not seduction, not really. He would learn her habits, her blind spots, the gaps in her review process. He would not actually become anything to her. He had done worse with less reason in the property game. Overpromised, oversold, smiled at people whose money he was about to lose. This was the same skill, pointed somewhere new. He told himself this for exactly as long as it took to meet her. The Lagos State Engineering Excellence Dinner is the kind of event Fola attends because her absence would be more conspicuous than her presence. She wears the same charcoal dress she has worn to 4 similar dinners, gives the same 45-second answer when asked about her current projects, and is making her way toward the exit at 9:15 when a man she does not recognize falls into step beside her with the specific irritating confidence of someone who has rehearsed this.
You're the one who failed the Marina Heights inspection, he says, not a question. I am. Everyone at my table was talking about it, like you'd personally insulted them. I told them their support columns didn't meet the load specification in the original design. If that reads as an insult, the problem isn't my report. He laughs. Short, genuine. Not the laugh of a man trying to charm her. Or at least not obviously. I'm Emeka. Fola. She does not extend her hand. I have an early site visit. You always leave early? I always leave when there's nothing left to learn in a room. He should let her go. The plan, as Okonkwo's people designed it, calls for patience, for a slow architecture of trust built over months, not a single conversation that ends in 9 seconds of dismissal at a hotel exit. But something in the flatness of her voice, not coldness exactly, something more like exhaustion disguised as precision, catches in him in a way the brief did not account for. What would there have been to learn, he asks, if you'd stayed?
She studies him for a second longer than the question requires. Probably nothing. Most people in there are congratulating each other for things that haven't happened yet. And you don't do that? I don't have the patience for hypotheticals. I deal with what's actually load-bearing. She leaves. He stands in the lobby for a full minute, recalibrating, and calls Tunde from his car. She's not what the file said.
He studies her the way he once studied investors. Find the gap, fill it. Except the gap, when he finally locates it, after weeks of careful, deniable proximity, the same engineering conferences, the same favorite buka near her office, conversations that always begin as though by accident, is not vanity or loneliness in the way he expected. It is something closer to a wound she has organized her entire life around without ever naming it. He learns, slowly, that she does not want to be impressed. She has spent her whole career around men who perform competence loudly. What she responds to, what actually moves something behind her composed, exacting face, is someone who checks, who notices the same small failures she notices, who does not flinch when she is difficult, because to her, difficult simply means correct. So he becomes that, not performed, not exactly, or not only performed. He reads 2 structural engineering textbooks cover to cover, not summaries, so that when she mentions a failure mode in passing, he can ask the right follow-up question instead of nodding blankly. He shows up to a public site walkthrough in pouring rain, soaked through, not because anyone is watching, but because he told her the week before that he wanted to actually understand what she does, and showing up mattered more to her than any gift he could have sent. Most people say that and don't come, she says, water running off her umbrella as she watches him squint up at scaffolding he clearly does not fully understand. I came because you said you'd be here, not because I wanted credit for it. She doesn't answer. But 3 days later, she texts him. First, which he will learn later is something she almost never does, a photograph of a crack pattern in a parking structure with no caption at all, simply because she thought he might find it interesting. It is, he realizes, with something between satisfaction and discomfort, the engineering equivalent of intimacy. Months pass this way. Long phone calls that begin with her describing a site report in forensic detail and end somewhere far more personal. The 2 of them talking past midnight about nothing in particular and everything that matters. She tells him, eventually, about the sound the building made. Not the political story, not her father's name, not the case, not the steel, just the sound. The 9 seconds. The way it has lived in her chest for 19 years and never once been spoken aloud to another person. I was 3 streets away, she says. I didn't even understand what I was hearing until the dust reached us.
Ifichuku has spent 10 years trying to prove what happened on Ikorodu Road was not an accident, and 9 of those years estranged from the half-sister who shares her father's blood and none of her appetite for confrontation. Raised by a different mother in Ajegule, 2 bus rides and a class divide away from the comfortable Ikoyi childhood Fola never asked for and never fully enjoyed, Ifi met her half-sister exactly 4 times before adulthood and has spoken to her perhaps a dozen times since. The estrangement is not dramatic. It is simply the weight of 2 women who represent 2 different versions of the same man's failure, neither one able to look at the other without saying something they'd rather not.
What Ifi has that Fula has spent 2 decades refusing to look at directly is the file. A journalist's archive of court documents, leaked inspection reports, and one recorded interview, never published, the source too frightened to go on record, with the junior site supervisor who flagged the substituted steel 3 weeks before the collapse and was fired for it. The supervisor's name was Chukwuma Okonkwo. He died in the collapse anyway. having been let go but never actually leaving the site, returning that final week to argue one more time with 4 men who would not listen. He was Daniel Okonkwo's older brother. Ify has known this for 6 years. She has never told Fuller, partly out of old resentment, partly because she has never been entirely certain what to do with a fact that implicates both their father and a man who has since become one of the most dangerous developers in Lagos.
What changes everything is a financial record she stumbles across while investigating Okonkwo's newest project, a 16-story mixed-use tower rising on reclaimed land in Lekki, fast-tracked through permits with suspicious speed. Buried in a contractor's payment ledger is a name she recognizes from somewhere she cannot immediately place: Emeka Obi, paid a monthly retainer with no corresponding work product. It takes her 4 days and one furious phone call to an old contact in property law to understand what she is looking at. Emeka Obi is the man her sister has been engaged to for 2 months. Ify sits with this information for longer than she would like to admit, turning over every reason silence might be the safer choice. Telling Fuller will look like jealousy. It will look like an estranged sister inserting herself into a fairy tale at the worst possible moment, using an old family wound as a weapon.
It will look, worst of all, like another Adeyinka woman crying wolf about buildings, about her father's old sins resurfacing in a new shape. And Fola, of all people, has spent her whole adult life refusing to be that one. But the alternative is watching her sister walk unknowingly into the same structure of silence that killed 211 people and a brother Ify never met. She calls Fola for the first time in 8 months. "I need to show you something," Ify says. "And I need you to actually look at it before you decide I'm doing this for the reason you think I'm doing this." Fola almost hangs up twice during the conversation that follows. She does not, in the end, because Ify says one sentence that lands somewhere Fola cannot immediately dismiss. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to check it the way you check everything else." So she checks it. Quietly. It takes her 9 days, working at night after site visits, cross-referencing payment records Ify hands over against permit filings she can access through her own credentials. What she finds does not at first point at Emeka specifically. It points at the Lekki Tower itself, a structural report submitted under the name of a junior engineer she has never met, with load calculations that look correct at a glance and wrong on the second, more careful read. The kind of wrongness that takes someone who has spent 20 years learning to distrust glances. She pulls the original submission file. The metadata traces the document's last edit to an IP address she does not recognize, accessed through a login credential belonging to her own firm's shared review server, a server only a handful of people have access to, one of whom she eventually confirms with a sick, sliding certainty is a guest account created and authorized under her own name 3 months ago at her own request, for a man she was teaching how her work functioned because she loved how interested he seemed. She does not confront him. Not yet. This is the part of herself she trusts most. The part that does not act on a feeling, only on a confirmed structural failure. She applies the same forensic patience to her own engagement that she has applied to every cracked foundation in her career. Gather everything, verify it twice, understand the full shape of the failure before you say a single word about it. For 3 days, she continues planning the wedding. She continues taking his calls. She says nothing, and it costs her more than she will ever describe to anyone. Because some small, foolish part of her keeps hoping the data will resolve into an innocent explanation, the way a hairline crack sometimes turns out to be cosmetic rather than structural. It does not resolve. By the fourth day, with Ife's help, she has rebuilt the entire timeline. Okonkwo's death records, the falsified report, the guest credential, the payment ledger, and beneath all of it, the name Chukwuma Okonkwo, dead 19 years, and connected to her father in a way she has She calls Ife back. Tell me everything you know about our father and Chukwuma Okonkwo. All of it. Don't protect me from any part of it. What Ife tells her over 4 hours that night is the part of the story Fola has spent her whole life building a career around avoiding. Chukwuma Okonkwo was the site supervisor who discovered the steel substitution at Ikorodu Road. He took it to Bayo Adeyinka personally, expecting, naively as if he tells it, that the man would halt construction. Instead, Bayo fired him within the week, paid him a severance large enough to discourage questions, and made certain no record of the conversation survived in any company file. Chukwuma did not leave quietly. He returned to the site 3 weeks later, off the books, trying one final time to get anyone to listen, and was inside the building, arguing with a foreman on the 3rd floor when it came down. Daniel Okonkwo was 22.
He buried his brother and spent the next 17 years building himself methodically and patiently into someone with enough power to make Bayo Adeyinka's name mean something different than it had meant before. By the time Bayo died, Okonkwo had not yet finished what he intended to do with that power. He simply redirected it toward the only Adeyinka left standing. He didn't want to hurt you physically, Ife says. He wanted to break you the way our father's negligence broke 211 strangers and his own brother, publicly, in front of everyone who'd ever believed you were untouchable. And he wanted to do it during the same week as the tower's opening, so that if anyone ever questioned the building's safety afterward, the engineer who reviewed it would be too disgraced and too heartbroken to be taken seriously as a witness.
Fola sits with the phone against her ear for a long time after Ife finishes, the wedding dress hanging in its garment bag 3 feet away, and understands, with the specific clarity she brings to every collapsed structure she has ever examined, exactly what she's looking at. Not a love story that went wrong. An engineering failure, 19 years in the making, with her own father as the load-bearing flaw nobody ever flagged in time. The wedding is in 4 days. Fola tells no one, not Emeka, not her mother, not the wedding planner, what she now knows. She continues with the same composed precision she brings to a site she's already decided to fail, to behave exactly as expected. What she's actually doing, in the hours she is not seen, is building a case file with the same rigor she would bring to a structural report that will determine whether a building stands or falls.
She and Ife walk through the nights. Payment records, the falsified report with its metadata trail, an old recorded interview transcript, and one new piece Ife obtains through a contact still owed a favor. A voice recording made 11 weeks earlier of Emeka in a moment of half-drunk guilt, admitting to a woman he believed was simply a sympathetic stranger at a bar Ife had quietly arranged for him to encounter, that he had gotten in deeper than he meant to with someone he was supposed to just be using. The recording does not name Fola. It does not need to. Combined with the payment ledger and the falsified report, it is enough. Fola does not tell Emeka any of this is coming.
She continues to let him believe until the morning of the wedding itself that he has gotten away with it completely. The morning of the wedding, Emeka sits in his groom's suit 2 hours before the ceremony, jacket on, tie undone, staring at a window without seeing the view. Tunde calls twice. He does not answer either time. He has, in the last week, started having the thought he has spent 9 months refusing to finish, that whatever happens after today, he does not actually want Okonkwo's plan to succeed. Not anymore. Not against this particular woman. And he has no idea how to stop a machine he built himself and can no longer steer. He does not know, sitting there, that the machine has already been disassembled by someone else's hands. The ceremony begins beautifully, the way things do when every detail has been chosen with care. A venue overlooking the lagoon, 400 guests in their finest, a dress Fola selected for the first time in her adult life because she wanted.
Something beautiful without first calculating its risk. She comes down the aisle composed, her eyes bright in a way longtime colleagues will later describe as the only time they ever saw her look unguarded. What none of them know is that the woman walking toward the altar has spent the last 72 hours not grieving, but building. The composure is not innocence. It is the calm of an engineer who has already failed the inspection and is simply choosing the moment to announce it. The officiant invites the vows to begin. Before Emeka can reach for the microphone, before the screen behind the altar, rigged days earlier by Tunde's people without Fola's knowledge, can flicker to life with whatever footage Okonkwo intended to use to humiliate her, Fola reaches for it herself. The room assumes for one held breath that she is about to say something for him. Something tender. Something the bride does before the vows as a surprise.
I want to thank everyone for coming, she says, her voice carrying clean and level through the sound system. The same voice she uses to read a failed load calculation aloud to a room full of men who don't want to hear it. Before we continue, there's something everyone here deserves to know, and I'd rather you hear it from me than from a screen. She does not raise her voice. She does not cry. She simply lays it out the way she lays out a structural failure. Cause, mechanism, consequence. She tells 400 guests that the man standing beside her was hired 11 months ago by a developer named Daniel Okonkwo to get close enough to her professional review process to manipulate a structural report for a 16-story tower currently under construction in Lekki. She tells them about the guest credential created under her own name. She tells them finally, and for the first time in her life, out loud, in front of anyone, about the sound the Ikorodu Road Tower made the morning she was 19 years old. Ife, seated in the second row, holds up a small recorder, the bar recording already cued, and the room does not need her to play more than 15 seconds of it before the murmur that has been building since Fola's second sentence breaks into something closer to a wave. Emeka does not move. He stands beside her in his groom suit, microphone still in the officiant stand where he never got the chance to reach for it, and understands, with a clarity that arrives 19 seconds too late to help him, that the woman he spent 11 months learning has spent the last 3 days on making everything he
You were
and
never
Okonkwo built,
hard to get.
using the exact
You were
skill she
just better
used to
at
fail
this than you
every
wanted to be.
dangerous building Lagos
I hope
ever
eventually
tried
that
to see
cost you
past her.
something.
Fola, I'm not finished, she says, not unkindly, simply factually, and continues. She tells the room that copies of the falsified report, the payment ledger, and the recorded interview have already been delivered that morning to the Lagos State Building Authority and to 2 newspapers whose names she states plainly. She tells them that the tower's opening, scheduled for the following week, will not be happening as planned.
Two newspapers run the story within days, this time with enough verified documentation that it cannot be quietly settled or made to disappear the way the case against Bayo Adeyinka once was. Daniel Okonkwo is arrested 3 weeks later, not in the end for the personal vendetta against the Adeyinka name, which never makes it anywhere near a courtroom, but for fraud and falsification of safety documents, the charge that actually has teeth, the charge that matters to the people who would have lived or died in that building. Emeka is arrested alongside him, charged in connection with the falsified credential and the document fraud. Thank you for watching to the end. You enjoyed what you just watched? Click the subscribe button to get updated on our next story. You can also check out our channel for other amazing stories.